It is considered the best conference in college football and has been for years. And this year, the SEC is even better thanks to the additions of Texas and Oklahoma X of the Big 12. Yes, college football is back. Kicks off once again in Dublin, Ireland with Florida State and Georgia Tech. Let's bring in former FSU star Bryant McFadden and fellow HQ college football analyst Chip Patterson talking Southeastern Conference football. And gentlemen, good to be back with you both. Football is back. Let's talk Texas. They won the Big 12 in their last season there. They reached the college football playoffs, losing in the semis to Washington. They have Quinn Ewers back, but have lost a pair of running backs to injury. The Longhorns' win total this year is 10.5 here in year one in the SEC. Chip, start with you. Over or under that figure?
Ooh, I'm going under, Jim. And the way that I see this is there are just a few too many games that I would categorize as a toss-up. Because if everything goes well for Steve Sarkisian, Quinn Ewers, and this Longhorns team, I do think that their ceiling is to be 12-0. But if they were to lose what I think are 4 toss-ups on this schedule, they also could be 8-4. I am not ready to give Texas a win when they have to walk into the big house to play the reigning champion Michigan Wolverines. I am not ready to give Texas a win when it comes to playing Oklahoma because, hello, have you ever seen the Red River rivalry? Everything is a one-score game. Georgia's the best team in the country, and Texas A&M in College Station on rivalry weekend is going to be an absolute hornet's nest. So for a team that I already think is having their depth tested at running back and defensive line, I think there are too many concerns for me to commit to 11-1. I think they could be playing for an SEC championship on December 7th, but ultimately I've got 10-2, and that's an under.
Chip, I agree with you. There's nothing else I could add. You hit it dead on the head when you talk about your commentary in regards to this over. I'm right there with you. Look at the 4 toss-up games. I believe they will lose 2 of those ball games. Now you pick and choose who those 2 teams potentially could be, but it starts, as you mentioned, in September, traveling to Ann Arbor. And the thing about Michigan, yes, they lost a lot of professional players to the NFL, but their style of play is very, very difficult for most teams, especially defensively for opposing teams. Michigan will run the football down the teeth of your defense. And you talked about the depth concerns for the Longhorns, especially in the interior of their defense. They don't spread you out in Michigan. No, they go old-fashioned 9-on-7 type of play, and we're coming down the teeth of your defense, especially seeing that early in the year. That could be a daunting task for Texas. And that September matchup can tell us all we need to know about the Longhorns, because you talked about that Georgia matchup. Guess what? Guess what? Their style of play is similar to what Michigan does on the offensive side. Georgia has a host of running backs that can go at any given time, along with a professional, legit first-round quarterback in Carson Beck. So I echo everything that you talked about when you look at the concerns for Texas not being able to surpass 10.5 wins, and I'm right there with you. Give me the under.
Yeah, how about the Horns schedule, huh? Not only is it first year in the SEC that includes the Dogs, but they get the defending champs Michigan on the schedule as well. After losing to Alabama last season, those Georgia Bulldogs missed out on the college football playoffs a season ago. The Dogs are again #1 going into the season. They, too, have their quarterback back in Carson Beck, who has the shortest odds for the Heisman Trophy. His team, like Texas, has a win total of 10.5. B-Mac, where are you on the Bulldogs win total?
Well, Jim, Chip, initially I was back and forth with this win total, but then as I analyzed the roster, I analyzed the games, some very, very tough matchups, especially on the road. I like Georgia to go over their win total, and here's why. When you look at the teams, they will play starting off neutral at a neutral site with Clemson, even though Georgia, they really don't play good football in the Mercedes-Benz Dome. I like them to take care of business against Clemson. And then you look at the first legit road test, September 28th at Alabama. A very, very daunting task, but the roster is in favor of Georgia, right? Georgia has a better quarterback than Alabama. Georgia has a better defense than Alabama. Georgia has better running backs than Alabama. Georgia has a better offensive line. And, of course, Georgia has a better coach than Alabama. No knock on Kalen DeBoer and his guys, but Kirby Smart is him in college football. He's the best coach in college football. And then when you transition to traveling to Austin, I talked about the defensive concerns for the Longhorns. And the way they play offense in Athens is a little bit of an old school style with a new school style kind of draped in the mix here or there. So I like Georgia as well. So I see Georgia surpassing this win total. I think 11 wins is a reality for Kirby Smart, so I'm taking the over.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, let the children sing. Okay, so I see exactly those two road games are going to be very, very tricky. But I don't think that Carson Beck, with the whole year under his belt, is going to lose both of those road games. And especially if they drop the first one, it's going to get their attention so they make sure they don't lose the second one, because this is a Georgia team, after coming just a few plays short of winning the SEC championship and making the college football playoff, they are not going to let that SEC championship slip away again. So Carson Beck, in terms of returning quarterbacks, is one of the top quarterbacks in the country. In terms of the NFL draft, he's potentially the first quarterback to go off the board. And so I imagine that Carson Beck, who is going to get a lot of help with the addition of Trevor Etienne in the backfield to help out that run game, I do think that this Georgia team is 11-1. I agree. And we are both on the over for the Dogs.
Gone.
Can we hear the children one more time? Chip, I love that cue. Can we hear it one more time?
There you go. Gone is Nick Saban, replaced by Kalen DeBoer at Alabama. That's going to take some getting used to, that's for sure. The Crimson Tide, another team that has their quarterback returning in Jalen Milroe. The Tide lost in the college football semis to Michigan. They won 11 straight between that setback and the one to Texas. The number for Bama this season is 9.5. Chip, where are you on that figure?
I think Jalen Milroe is going to win the Heisman Trophy. I think that Jalen Milroe has better offensive coaching this year than he did last year, even though the head coach was the greatest of all time, Nick Saban. I think that what Kalen DeBoer was able to do for Michael Penix Jr. is going to translate to Jalen Milroe. Now, Jalen Milroe is not the same player at all as Michael Penix Jr., but what we've seen from Kalen DeBoer is that he is a winner at every single level. Doesn't matter whether it's NAIA, whether it's the Mountain West Conference, whether it's the Pac-12, or now in the Southeastern Conference. I think that what we are going to see out of this Alabama team is a group that is built the right way. They are built at the line of scrimmage. Their offensive line is one of the best in the SEC. I think their defensive line and defensive front, with Deontay Lawson being the captain of the defense at the linebacker position, I just think they're still so rock solid at important places on the depth chart. They're not without concerns. Edge rusher, cornerback would be the places that I would point out. 3 really tough road games on this schedule and a visit from Georgia. But ultimately, I see a 10-2 team that enters November in the thick of the SEC championship race. You throw a 9.5, I say over.
Here's where the rubber meets the road. Here's where the rubber meets the road. Chip, cool points, cool nuggets. Yes, I think Jalen Milroe is really going to progress in this new offensive scheme. But when I look at their schedule, I see potential roadblocks for Alabama. Georgia, #1 for sure. Then you travel to Baton Rouge, LSU rival, Tennessee, Oklahoma. You have, of course, Auburn, and then Missouri as well. People are sleeping on Mizzou. I think Missouri is going to have a heck of a year. When you look at their quarterback, when you look at Luther, one of the best wide receivers in college football, they're going to do numbers, and they have a very, very favorable schedule. So when you look at Alabama, they're going to have some intriguing matchups in their season when you look at September, October, and then get it into November. So I see some roadblocks for this team, and Jalen Milroe is going to do numbers. I still have some concerns at the wide receiver spot when you look at who is going to emerge to be one of the big-time playmakers when it comes to the passing game. So I'm taking the under. I think this is a year when you look at a first-year head coach, even though the cupboard is not bare there in Alabama, it's going to take some time to really establish that type of chemistry. And oh, by the way, I forgot about Oklahoma. They traveled to Oklahoma, as I stated. So there are some difficult road games for Kalen DeBoer in year 1 in Tuscaloosa. So you go over. I can see the over happening. But if someone had to twist my arm and say, I got to make a pick, I guess, B-Mac, I got to save my arm. I'm taking the under.
Yeah, they got a roadie also, Wisconsin, too. Plenty of Saban recruits hit the portal while DeBoer players transferred in, so we'll see how that plays out. Okay, we talked heavy hitters in the Longhorns, Dogs, and Tide. Which teams, though, represent the Southeastern Conference in the conference title game? SEC championship is what, B-Mac? You're first up.
Pick to win the SEC championship, give me UGA. UGA, the best team, not just in the SEC, the best team in college football. Revenge will be on their mind starting week 1 versus Clemson. So I got UGA to win the SEC championship.
Yeah. Who's that coming down the track? A mean old thing in red and black. I just see so much, so many key pieces. We talk a lot about Carson Beck, but what about like Tate Ratledge? Like, what about this offensive line that might be one of the best in the country? What about a defensive line that feels like they got something to prove? Because all the conversation was how it had finally dropped off after the loss of Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter. They've got players that have just been young bucks on those title teams waiting their time. They're about to take over as starters. I think that Georgia is a team on a mission. I've got the Dogs winning in Atlanta on December 7th.
All right, gentlemen, Texas and Alabama made the college football playoffs last year, but the Horns, of course, were in the Big 12, so just one team from the SEC last season in the playoffs. FanDuel has 4 teams from the conference favored to reach the playoffs. How many, if any, reach the college football playoffs this season? Chip, what say you?
Yeah, I'm not going to stray far from FanDuel Sportsbook, where you can make every moment more. It is teams that are right there at the top. I'm talking about Georgia, obviously getting one of the top seeds as the SEC champion. I've got Texas and Alabama kind of as those next 2 teams up, as I'm already over, on Alabama, thinking they're a 10-win team. I think Texas is 10-2 as well. And then Ole Miss is a team that if I was to power rate them, I would not necessarily have the Rebels as high as they are in the AP poll, but I do think that they've got the schedule to finish with a whole bunch of wins, and I think Lane Kiffin knows what he needs to do when it comes to style points for the committee. So give me 4 teams in the college football playoff from the SEC: Georgia, Texas, Alabama, Ole Miss.
Chip, I agree with you. I have the same number. I think 4 will get in for the SEC, but I have a little different order when it comes to the teams. I got UGA, I got Texas, I got Mississippi as well. I love their schedule. I mean, take the over when it comes to their win total if you want to add some extra bank to your cash roll. And I love Missouri. I have Missouri in there as well, so I don't have Alabama getting in. I have Mississippi, I have Mizzou, I have Texas, I have UGA. So you can book 4 teams from the SEC getting in. I agree with you, but I think Missouri is going to be that one team that really surprises a lot of people when you look at their experience in key positions and their overall schedule.
B-Mac, we could all use a little extra bank to our cash roll, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Our thanks to HQ, college football analyst. Yeah, college football is back. Bryant, McFadden, and Chip Patterson are our thanks to you. And here's what they have going on for this coming season. Those 2 are in lockstep when you're talking Georgia Bulldogs. Not only are they on the over of that 10.5 win total for the Dogs, but they have the Georgia Bulldogs winning the SEC championship. You see the odds there at plus 180, though they differ on the win total with Alabama, as BMAC is on the over, or under, I should say. Chip is on the over, and they're in lockstep on Texas as well, with the Horns going under that 10.5 win total this, their first season in the Southeastern Conference.